Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. After discussing the philosophical and logical points 1 through 7 about concept of God and the evidence, we now discuss the role of science, followed by few examples as scientific evidence for existence of God. Before we start, few clarifications. One very important note up front, which is science cannot prove or disprove the existence of God like it does for physical things in the laboratory under the microscope, simply because science has its limitations, and science is the study of physical world or nature, not a tool to study beyond. Furthermore, often science tells us how things are and their relation to each other, but not why. We use science to understand and analyze the seen nature surrounding us, not the unseen, ghaib. By definition, the unseen cannot be seen with our physical eyes or scientific eyes, but rather with minds and hearts, which require stage 3 of human consciousness, as discussed in part 1 of this series. That being said, what we can do with science is to use it as a tool to see, discover, and ultimately reflect upon manifestation of God, His effects, His work, and His workmanship, or what the Quran calls signs of God throughout the universe. That is where science can be a great instrument of discovery, and with all the new advancements in multiple disciplines within science, we are getting closer and closer to undeniable facts regarding the intelligent design, plan, and the blueprint behind this creation. Some of the newer fields within science, such as study of genes, atoms, and the brain, which are in their infancy stage, are showing many clues in the creation and its purpose. In fact, science often strengthens a believer's belief in God. That is why the Quran encourages mankind to travel, look at the nature surrounding him by any means available, to discover and reflect, as it says, travel in the land and see how He originated creation, or indeed in creation of heavens and earth and alteration of day and night, there are signs for those of understanding, those who use their minds, those who reflect. Or asks more precisely, who created the heavens and earth and sent down for you rain from the sky, causing to grow thereby gardens of joyful beauty, which you could not otherwise have grown the trees thereof. Or makes statements such as, and those they invoke other than God create nothing, and they themselves are created. Islam and science do not contradict each other, and each has a role to play. Science is a product of human intellect, and it is supposed to be used to serve, to make life easier and comfortable for mankind, and ultimately fulfill mankind's physical needs to some extent. Man uses science as an instrument to discover, explore, and innovate. However, because science is man-made, it is bound by human mind and cannot go further. It cannot explain anything beyond man's immediate physical boundary or his intellectual capability or perception. Man's mind is not perfect, therefore science cannot be perfect and answer everything. The knowledge through science is gained gradually and is prone to error. As such, most of it's experimental. Most of it is experimental, and it cannot prove everything. It can make educated guesses based on similar scientific studies as to how things occur. Hence, many things remain as purely theoretical until some are proven with technology, and some may never be proven, such as creation of universe. Nor science deals with morals, ethical and behavioral issues. Behavioral science, like psychology, deals with how things are and perhaps how human psyche works, but not how things should be. And foremost, science may fulfill man's physical needs, but definitely not the spiritual needs. So, while science itself does not prove or disprove existence of God, as discussed, it does play an important role in facilitating evidence for existence of God. And as we gain deeper understanding of the nature surrounding us through science, the evidence keeps mounting toward the proof. The second point is about the scientists themselves. Just because someone has expertise in a field of science like physics or biology, or may even be a Nobel Prize winner in his or her field of science, that does not make him an expert in the field of divinity and philosophy. We have scientists who are atheists or agnostics, and at the same time we have many scientists who believe in existence of God, among whom many are Nobel Prize winners. They may be expert in their fields, but not in the field of philosophy or divinity. Just because someone is expert in biology does not make him an expert, an authority or leader in proving or disproving the existence of God. As indicated, it is not the job of science or within its scope to provide proof or their lack of when it comes to supernatural or unseen. That is why one can debunk the claims of scientists who are atheists through science as well as philosophical and logical arguments, much like we have so far presented and continue to do so in this series. Unfortunately, there are those who reject God and call themselves progressives or intellectuals, like Yuval Harari, who wrote the book Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind, where he said, humanity's greatest invention is religion, and that with science, there is no need for religion or God. Indeed, during 18th and 19th century, after the Industrial Revolution and scientific victory, West thought religion has served its purpose and has been replaced by science and secular knowledge, as some social scientists and psychologists concurred. For example, the famous psychoanalyst Freud divided human race's life in 3 eras or stages: superstition era, religion era, and scientific era. He said that now, being the scientific era, religion is outdated. However, we ask, if that was the case, if religion and belief in higher being was outdated, then why is it, with all the technological advances in science today, we still have majority of mankind identifying themselves as religious, spiritual, believing in higher power, as mentioned in the latest surveys? If science is a direct replacement of religion and belief in God, why didn't science replace faith? Why do people still pray or go to houses of worship then? The answer is because worship is in man's nature, fitra. Or simply put, man is wired to worship. as discussed in part 1. The reality is science is just a tool of discovery, not a replacement for God or religion. However, to some like Harari, Dawkins, and Freud, over time, science and secular thinking replaced God, and science became an idol. Instead of serving mankind, mankind became subservient to it. Unfortunately, science is indecisive and constantly evolving. What it rejected yesterday will uphold today, and whatever it accepts today may reject tomorrow. As such, those who idolize science are subject to perpetual restlessness with anxiety for unforeseen changes. To them, the world we live in has become devoid of meaning and purpose with no higher power and order to guide it. Religion can restore the humanity, peace, and tranquility as it instills in man love for goodness and the courage to stand against all evil. One can achieve a peaceful, secure life in the shade of believing in God, who is the ultimate source of peace, tranquility, and power. That said, not all Western intellectuals and scientists have been against religion because not all are absolute materialists. Many realized through debate and research that belief is a natural necessity for mankind and for any period. For example, Sir James Jeans, who was an English physicist, astronomer, and mathematician, also an agnostic, said, "The greatest problems of science could not be resolved without believing in God." When asked by the Observer in London, "Do you believe that life on this planet is the result of some sort of accident, or do you believe that it is part of some great scheme?" he replied, "I incline to the idealistic theory that consciousness is fundamental, and that the material universe is derivative from consciousness, not consciousness from the material universe." He also said, "The universe appears to have been designed by a pure mathematician." We discussed this in detail in 2 lectures called "Is Religion Man-Made?" and "Is Religion No Longer Needed?", which we urge the audience to listen for more details. The third point on science is about a response to the atheists and materialists like Richard Dawkins, who say, "With advances in science, gaps in our understanding the universe are filled, and eventually no work for God or a place for him. When there is gap in science, that is, if science cannot figure out or explain something or has not discovered something yet, hence there is a gap, the scientists go to work to fill these gaps. But the religious and the theologians go to work searching for these gaps in order to fill them with God and religion. If science cannot answer, then God must have done it." If science cannot answer, then God must have done it. Our response is that we reject such assertion and thought process because for us believers, God is not a cause similar to other causes in the same rank. So any gap we find, we fill it with God. Muslim scholars commonly say God is cause of all causes. In other words, for us, God is not a cause next to other causes. So when there is a gap in science, when there's a link missing in the chain of causes, we just fill it with God or his work. We say God is above other causes. He is the cause for all causes. Richard Dawkins has not thought through this assertion or opinion. Let's illustrate how the believers look at the cause of all causes through an example. Imagine you go to the market and buy a box of decorative lights with all colors. These lights on the surface have no relation to each other, beside the fact when plugged in, they turn on with various colors. That is their primary job, which is to give light. Now, if we add another box of light to them, we have not added anything new, just increased their numbers. The new lights do the same thing. However, if you take these lights and put them up outside above your entrance door in an arrangement to make a sentence or give a message like, "Welcome to our house" or "our center," this message is not coming from just one or two lights, but all together. Or you could say this message is a result of all the lights coming together, lighting up together. And this result is beyond each light's primary purpose. It is their arrangement in such a fashion that gives the message as a result. We do not expect such a result from any other individual light bulb throughout the house. Nor do we expect a pile of lights in a corner of the room to give such a message. We then say the one who arranged them had an intelligence who arranged them in this way with a goal in mind, a goal beyond their primary function. His goal, or final goal, was to give a message. Scientists who think and work the same way as Richard Dawkins brings up lack of causes in a chain of causes, missing links, and search to find the missing link or fill the gap in the chain of causes. But the religious or the theologians do not place God in the missing link next to other causes, as if God is a cause among the chain of causes. This way of thinking is neither philosophical nor religious, because a religious way of thinking looks at phenomena from final cause perspective, not material or formal cause. A quick review of Aristotle's four causes is crucial to understand this. Aristotle's point may be taken this way. If we ask what makes something so and so, we can give four very different sort of answer, each appropriate to a different sense of makes. What are they? They are material cause, out of which a thing comes to be. For example, the bronze is a cause of a statue. The silver is a cause of bowl. Formal cause is the design of something, including the shape and components. Efficient cause, the one who built it. Final cause, the purpose. Simply put, for material cause, X is what Y is made out of. For formal cause, X is what is to be Y. For efficient cause, X is what produces Y. Final cause is what Y is for. Consider the following example. The table is made out of wood. Having four legs and a flat top makes this count as a table. A carpenter makes a table. Having a surface suitable for eating or writing makes this work as a table, which is the final goal, or what its purpose is. The emphasis on the final cause highlights Aristotle's belief that everything in nature has an inherent purpose or goal. While originally applied to philosophical inquiries, the concept of the four causes can be used to analyze various fields like science, art, and design. A godly person a religious person or a theologian asks a general question to reach an overarching final conclusion, which is, what scheme, plan, or goal has created such chain of causes and effects? For example, male and female in humans and animals who have instinctive attraction to each other, or they have tendencies to each other to engage in procreation so their species can survive, which is the final goal. You don't refer a cause to an earlier generation, to a great-grandmother, and say, all these are her children because she herself was an effect from an earlier cause in the chain, which are her parents and grandparents. In the light example I gave, a person who wants to conclude the final goal will look at the message those arranged lights give, not the lights themselves, which have their own immediate causes. They are showing a final result, which is the message they give. Welcome to our house. The message is not given just by the lights, but also the owner of the house who arranged them together with such a design or scheme. This is called the argument for the final cause or ultimate goal, which is completely different than the material cause, formal cause, efficient cause as defined earlier. We may or may not know one or two of these intermediate causes, which the religious leave them as gap to be discovered and filled by the science. Because their main concern is not these intermediate causes, but rather the final cause, the ultimate goal. They look at the lights and say, these light bulbs can give light on their own or exist without any message due to their construct, electricity, etc. However, there is another cause with a final goal in mind who has designed or arranged these lights as such in such order to give a specific message. That is the final cause, what the religious, the theologian, or philosopher consider. Unlike some of the scientists who focus only on the immediate causes. As religious and believers, we see God as the cause of all causes. Anything after that, meaning all intermediate causes in the chain of causes and effects, are what we call hadith, occurrences, meaning they did not exist but came to be due to causes. The only difference in occurrences is that they happen in different times, meaning some happened before the others, but all happened at a point in time, meaning time existed when they happened. Also, they're all contingent, meaning it is possible for them not to exist as it did before their existence. So, it is possible for all the occurrences not to exist. We must then find a must exist, a non-contingent, that all the possible to exist contingents rely on to exist. Because if the must exist, non-contingent, did not exist, nothing else could exist. So non-contingent is not in the same rank as the contingent. We say even that the chain of cause, if the chain of causes and effects were infinitely long, they are contingent. They could or could not exist at some point in time. The non-contingent is the final cause. A materialist may say even the non-contingent is a physical material, not beyond. The answer is physical material is not separate from an occurrence, event, and time. In other words, material is not separate from motion, time, or change of state. So they cannot be the changeless constant, firm, incessant cause. The chains of causes and effects are the beads in a necklace, or a light bulb in a daisy chain of decorative lights, or standing domino chips in a domino set. We tell such scientists that you look at all causes the same way. We don't. We conclude the existence of God through the final cause. Hence, the subject matter in our argument is different. What do we think of immediate gaps? Believers do not believe in a God that fills gaps. Do we think there are gaps in our understanding of the universe and our physical world? Of course, but we leave it to science to fill those gaps. There are believing as well as disbelieving scientists who work to find these answers and fill these gaps. Does science fill all the gaps? Of course not. Only a fraction of it. The limitation of science is totally understood by the believers. There are things the science has not discovered yet, and things it will never discover, because science is a physical tool for the natural, not supernatural, or the world beyond. However, one can say the things we discover through science become evidence toward the existence of God. When Isaac Newton discovered the formula for gravity, he did not say, I solved the problem, I filled the gap, so there is no God. In fact, he did the opposite. He said, there is a perfect system in operation in the universe that obeys certain laws precisely and in harmony. Therefore, there is an architect, a designer, an intelligent being. As such, he looked at the final cause. Even the scientific community cannot deny the order and precise laws and constants governing this world, as discussed in part 2 of this series. In fact, with the help of science, every day we discover the intricacy and subtle details of the order this world operates on. 2 arguments have been insisted upon by the believers, both of which the materialists or atheists cannot deny. First one is the order by design, nizam, and symmetry within the universe, which the best answer they could come up with is that the order appeared through evolutionary transformation. That's after Lamarck and Darwin. The disbelievers say it was all chaos in the beginning, but the order came due to evolution. However, science and many among the evolutionists cannot deny orders, as likes of Alexander Oparin, who said transformation was guided, not by randomness. More modern scientists like Francis Collins, who led the Human Genome Project as director of National Institute of Health, said under theistic evolution, that evolution occurred as biologists describe it, but under the direction of God. Thus, even if evolution is accepted as a theory, it has been under God's guidance, according to evolutionist scientists. Through science, in fact, we are discovering much more precise order than was known in the past. As an example, Max Planck, the theoretical physicist whose discovery of energy quanta won him the Nobel Prize in physics in 1918, in his The Nature of Matter speech at Florence, Italy, 1944, said, "A man who has devoted his whole life, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of force, which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atoms together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent spirit. This spirit is the matrix of all matters. Planck argued that the concept of God is important to both religion and science, but in different ways. In a lecture called Religion and Natural Science, given in 1937, Planck said, "Both religion and science require a belief in God. For believers, God is the beginning, and for the physicists, He is at the end of all considerations. To the former, He is the foundation, to the latter, the crown of the edifice of every generalized world view." Planck was the authority in quantum physics, contemporary to Einstein, who admired him, one of many within the scientific community who made similar assertions, and these are very well-known scientists. Thus, to those who claim science discards religion or opposes religion, we say it is exactly the opposite. They do not understand the goal of science. Science, in fact, gives us the capital, the tool to provide evidence toward God's existence. However, its goal is not to prove or disprove existence of God directly. God is not a physical matter to be analyzed in a lab. Its purpose is to observe and analyze things and phenomena and make the connections or relationships among them. Physical, chemical, or biological relations, etc. With science, you present physical evidence of something, like seeing something in the lab under the scope, or experimenting with something to support a claim. Consequently, as the evidence grows, it strengthens the argument toward the proof. As evidence adds up within nature by science, the scientists, all of these work to the advantage of those who believe, because it puts us a step closer toward proof of existence of God. Those who say science rejects God, they have not understood the role of science. There is, of course, much philosophical evidence, as well as those that we presented in points 1 through 7. Another common point raised by atheists is that they say if we were product of intelligent design, we should not have certain imperfection or extra features of no use in our bodies, like appendix, tonsils, or the blind spot in our eyes. They call these as mistakes or imperfections. The answer is this does not change the argument of intelligent design for multiple reasons. One being, when you look at the human's work of art, like a painting, a statue, or an expensive handmade luxury car, or a custom-built structure, and then maybe buy one and take one home, shortly after you take a deeper look and find some faults or imperfections, like a chipped paint, or perhaps inconsistency in color, or limitation in some features, you never say there was no intelligent design behind it. These do not change the argument because you can see the complexity of the design and the workmanship right in front of you. Just the appearance of any of these will say it was engineered. There is an intelligent design behind it. Second reason is, when it comes to work of science versus work of God, there are many things we do not know about yet, or science has not been able to ascertain, like the purpose of appendix or tonsils, at least till now. Even though there are new evidence that these organs have their purpose, some doctors may still believe they are vestigial organs, as humans can live without them. But what is to say that opinions will not change tomorrow? Why is it some people end up removing them and many don't? The appendix is currently believed to play a role in the immune system, acting as a safe house for beneficial gut bacteria, potentially allowing for a repopulation of the gut microbiome after a bout of illness like diarrhea, where good bacteria might be depleted. According to the National Institute of Health, until recently, the human appendix has been regarded as a rudimentary part of the intestine. During the past few years, however, several studies have suggested its immunological importance for the development and preservation of the intestinal immune system. The appendix has been shown to have an important interaction with the intestinal flora, considering the appendix as a safe house for the commensal gut flora. These studies show that commensal bacteria can be reintroduced from the appendix in case of diseases. And therefore, the appendix can be considered as an important part of intestinal health. According to McGill University Office of Science, the last 20 years of research have changed our perspective on this tiny organ. It may not be worthless after all. It may not be worthless after all. Based on converging observation, it has been hypothesized that our appendix may serve as a safe house for good bacteria. We have known for some time that bacteria exist in our gut and that they fulfill an important role. This gut microbiome is an important object of research. The bacteria lining up our colon thus need to be there, but what happens when you get severe diarrhea? You lose a lot of them. How do you replenish them quickly? The idea is that the appendix, which is known to host bacteria, would serve as a backup. Following diarrhea, its bacterial content would recolonize the colon to bring the ill person back to normal. So this is just a couple of studies as example. The purpose of tonsils is to act as a part of the immune system, primarily by trapping and fighting germs that enter the body through the mouth or nose, as they are located at the back of the throat and contain a large amount of white blood cells, which help kill bacteria and viruses, essentially serving as a first line of defense against infection. According to Cleveland Clinic, your tonsils are small but mighty. When they function normally, they help shield your body from many different types of infections. Of course, just like any other organ, if they get severe infection or stop functioning for whatever reason, they are removed without significant harm to the body due to their removal. The point is, over time, science has changed its mind in many things. Medical science is very much experimental and statistical. For every 10 successful treatments or medicines, there are 3 or 4 that fail. With all advancements in medicine, we still don't have cure for many elementary illnesses like cold, flu, or allergies, partly because we don't understand the mechanisms. Given our limited perspective, the question is, are these really flaws in human design? Then the question becomes, what is the complexity and design of a universe compared to a super luxury car or a custom-built house? What is a famous painting compared to, let's say, creation of a honeybee, let alone a human being? Another argument science has not been able to deny is the answer to the question of whether the universe has always existed or had a beginning, which we discussed in argument number 1. The science today believes in Big Bang, which points to the beginning of this universe, as believers have argued for ages. Even if we go back to before Big Bang occurrence, which the Quran points out where there was gas or smoke, we can answer the question as to why it did not happen before when it did, as discussed in argument number 2. There's a lot more to be said about the role of science and the over-reliance of materialists or atheists on an ever-changing source such as science for their argument, or their misconception of what the role of science should be. However, we stop at this point and continue with few examples among many of how science provides evidence toward argument for existence of God. Number 1, human nature. Looking at human nature, human consciousness, or what we Muslims call fitra, in two lectures called Am I Not Your Lord and the Psychology of Worship, we talked about all human beings having innate tendency to worship, or simply put, wired to worship. The question has always been who they should worship. In those lectures, we presented a sample of studies and opinions made by scientists, thinkers, and philosophers. The fact that mankind has gravitated toward God and worship throughout its history confirms this. There are many studies on human brain and its activity when it concerns God and worship. In his book, How God Changes Your Brain, Breakthrough Findings from a leading neuroscientist, Dr. Andrew Newberg, says, if you contemplate God long enough, something surprising happens in the brain. Neural functioning begins to change. Different circuits become activated, while others become deactivated. New dendrites are formed, new synaptic connections are made, and the brain becomes more sensitive to subtle realms of experience. Perceptions alter, beliefs begin to change, and if God has meaning for you, then God becomes neurologically real. For some, God may remain a primitive concept limited to the way a young child interprets the world. But for most people, God is transformed into a symbol or a metaphor, representing a wide range of personal, ethical, social, and universal values. And if you happen to be neuroscientist, God can be one of the most fascinating of human experiences to explore. Regarding the science of God, Newberg adds, for the past 15 years, I have investigated the neural mechanisms of spirituality with the same fervor that a minister contemplates God. Some religious rituals do nothing more than relax you. Others help to keep you focused and alert. But a few appear to take practitioners into transcendent realms of mystical experience where their entire lives are changed. Our research team at the University of Pennsylvania has consistently demonstrated that God is part of our consciousness, and that the more you think about God, the more you will alter the neural circuitry in specific parts of your brain. That is why I say with the utmost confidence that God can change your brain. And it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Jew, a Muslim, or a Hindu, or an agnostic, or an atheist. In Why God Won't Go Away, in his other book, I demonstrated that human brain is uniquely constructed to perceive and generate spiritual realities. Yet it has no way to ascertain the accuracy of such perceptions. Instead, our brain uses logic, reason, intuition, imagination, and emotion to integrate God and the universe into a complex system of personal values, behaviors, and beliefs. The religious impulse is rooted in the biology of the brain. He then continues, indeed, the more one contemplates God, the more mysterious God becomes. Some embrace this emergent ambiguity, some are frightened by it, some ignore it, and others reject it in its entirety. But the fact remains that every human brain, from early childhood on, contemplates the possibility that the spiritual realms exist. Believers like Isaac Newton, agnostics like Charles Darwin, and atheists like Richard Dawkins have all given serious consideration to humanity's fascination with God, because the moment God is introduced to the human brain, the neurological concept will not go away. The neurological concept will not go away. Above argument from Newberg resonates with the explanation we offered in the lecture called Am I Not Your Lord? For the Quranic verse 172, chapter 7, which says, when your Lord brought forth from the children of Adam, from their loins, backs, their descendants, and made them testify concerning themselves, saying, Am I not your Lord? They said, Yes, we do testify this, in case you should say on the day of judgment, we were truly unaware of it. Among the explanations we offered, additional arguments supporting the view of this pledge, which was taken in our nature, fitra, in interpretation number 4, which I suggested was the most plausible and a simpler interpretation, which is, the statement in verse 172 suggests that the pledge God has taken from the children of Adam's offsprings relates to their nature, fitra. He has established in their nature or conscious the tendency to acknowledge his lordship as the only God in the universe. Human beings grow up with this tendency until they deviate as a result of external factors. For some, of course. In other words, we are wired to call God our Lord as a result of pledge he took in our nature. Now, how was this pledge implemented? By which mechanism this pledge was implemented? Could be the way I presented in our interpretation number 3, which is our genetic programming, which usually includes all tendencies, one of which, I say, is the tendency to acknowledge Allah as our Lord by nature. So, Here is the additional argument supporting this interpretation. Now, for those who do acknowledge God, His existence, and even worship Him, this is well understood. What about those who, for one reason or another, reject this tendency or acknowledgement of God? Does it ever come out? Do they ever acknowledge God? Well, generally speaking, human beings are weak. They're weak creatures in a sense that during their lifetime, they experience sicknesses, diseases, hardship, death, and even wishes and desires that never come true. There are also dangers and vices that no one is immune from, not even kings and presidents. We all experience these weaknesses. Now, the question is, wouldn't humans like to eliminate all these weaknesses? The answer is, of course, we all want to go from weak to strong. But how? We cannot draw strength from someone who is weak himself and one who experiences sickness, hardship, and danger himself. A beggar does not go and beg from another beggar. A needy does not ask another needy for help. Therefore, the direction, the source of strength is a power, a force that has no needs, no worries, experiences no sicknesses, no hardships, dangers, and no death. He is the ultimate source of power and support. Like it or not, seek it or not, the direction, qibla, for our heart is this source. However, the Quran shows that when you encounter a difficulty and danger, that is, when you become conscious of this source of power and support, that is when you appeal to this source of power. Where does this consciousness come from? The Quran asserts you do have a sort of humbleness within your conscious, which is always observed by those who are God conscious, but for those who are not or do not even believe in God, once they face a hardship, a calamity, or a danger that they cannot prevent or control, they suddenly become humble before God. Appeal to God and ask for His help. Your ubudiyya, servitude to God, will appear at that moment. As such, the Quran gives an example of such person in the sea. And while the waters are calm, he's happy and perhaps not even thinking of God. When the storm comes and he no longer feels secure and fears of getting drowned, then he remembers God and asks for His help. Even the atheist. Once God rescues him and he returns to the land, he forgets again. Therefore, believer or disbeliever, this tendency of acknowledging God is in our nature through our genetic programming. That is what researchers like Newberg have consistently demonstrated, that God is part of our consciousness, as he explains in his book, Why God Won't Go Away. René Descartes, who was a French philosopher, mathematician, and a thinker, regarding the essence of this spiritual dimension or consciousness, says that God gave intellect to mankind by which humans can enter into dimensions such as spiritual consciousness, but animals cannot. For example, the human intellect is designed to enter in science and mathematics, think and analyze them. An animal cannot. Of course, there are different levels for different people. Descartes then says, same thing happens with our spiritual consciousness. We all have it. Some exercise it more than the others. When we look at this universe, its order, its shape, and constitution, we can't help but to acknowledge its wonders and the wisdom behind it, how harmonious it is with our intellect and nature. He says this awareness comes from our spiritual dimension or consciousness, what we call fitra. It is through this dimension we recognize the Creator, and at the end recognize our Lord who sustains us and the universe around us. This is Descartes' view, a very good interpretation of verse 7172 from a non-Muslim. In other words, we might add to what Descartes says that our consciousness is wired to recognize our Creator, or it is as if God asked us, "Am I not your Lord?" And we responded yes by actually listening and noting this spiritual consciousness. Our conscious is designed to notice many things in the creation and designed to reflect on its wisdom, hence responds yes to this question of "Am I not your Lord?" every day. Now, can we take this further? Is there anything else in our nature that points to consciousness and spirituality? The answer is yes. It is called worship. Modern neuroscience and psychology tell us that worship is a human universal and seems to be hardwired into our biology. There has been a growing body of literature that support the notion that the brain seems to have unique areas associated with spiritual seeking of the divine. Neuroscientists argue that the structure and function of the human brain predisposes us to believe in God. They claim that the site of God's biological substrate is the limbic system deep within the brain, which has long considered to be biological center for emotion. In his article, "Are We Hardwired for God?" in Psychiatric Times 25, Ron Joseph, a prominent neurotheologian, goes a step further to suggest that the limbic system is dotted with God neurons and God neurotransmitters, and argues that the structure and function of the brain predisposes us to believe in God. As indicated in his book, How God Changes Your Brain, the leading neuroscientist, Andrew Newberg, states that the human brain is uniquely constructed to perceive and generate spiritual entities. Hence, according to this research, just as human beings are driven by their biology to speak, eat, and procreate, they're also driven to engage in the spiritual pursuit of worship. We stop here and continue with additional examples of how science provides evidence toward proving existence of God, including intellectual reasoning and study of genes, next time, inshallah. Stay tuned. Wassalamu ala man ittaba'a al-huda.